Can I just, on behalf of EMCC Global, welcome you to this latest in this EMCC Global GPS Dialogue series. We are delighted to have Jennifer with us today. Jennifer's going to be talking about coaching virtual, remote and hybrid teams, which is something which we all need right now and have all got something to say about, I think. So Jennifer's a coach and author. She's a real thought leader in the area of group and team coaching, and also been an early pioneer in the virtual and remote space throughout her company, Potentials Realised, which itself is also an award-winning coaching skills training company. So we're super delighted to have Jennifer here today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you straight over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and good morning from Toronto, Canada. Much earlier in the day from you, but I hope your day is going well wherever you are in the world. As you heard from Nicola, my name is Jennifer Britton, and always a pleasure. I was here last year at this time, and so we're actually like doing a bit of a revisit of what I was talking about last October on coaching virtual and remote teams. As you heard, I'm an author. I just published on October 1st my 7th book. So I actually wrote and published the world's first book on group coaching back in 2009 with John Wiley and Sons as a publisher. That book is called Effective Group Coaching. Some of you may have met me through that, or maybe my second book, From One to Many, Best Practices for Group and Team Coaching. My passion has been virtual and remote for 3 decades now. In fact, I started out my career as a young leader, yes, in my early 20s, leading teams from Central and South America. For the first 15 years of my career, I worked with Canadian and British NGOs and also the United Nations, leading teams throughout Central and South America. And very much, my passion was twofold. Number one, how could we, as a team and as an organization, do the best work possible? Because most times we were on the front lines of post-disaster management. So it's very interesting for me in 2021 to see how this last year and a half has been playing out, certainly. I transitioned into the realm of coaching and set up Potentials Realised, my business, on April 7th, 2004, after coming back to Canada in 2001. And there's another reason why I'm so passionate about virtual, because I really hadn't anticipated ever becoming a coach. I fell into coaching in about 2001 when I was still a leader with the United Nations. And I was really looking for a modality that would help sustain the conversation. In fact, sustain the dialogue with the members of my team. And as I started my training with CTI, Coaches Training Institute, in those days, I kept putting my hand up as a young coaching student saying this is great, but I'm going back to my post and I'm not going to have the opportunity to sit down one-on-one, but I will be sitting down tomorrow with a government body, or I will be working with a community. How can I bring coaching to those environments? And in those days, it was really taboo. 20 years ago, it really was not as open and yes, this is what we need to do. But I am a renegade. I usually buck a lot of trends, and I'm thankful for that, because it's been really important that we've stimulated this dialogue that I think has really come full crescendo, where it is so recognized now that, scaling the coaching conversation to many, whether it's groups or teams, is essential. Today, in this presentation, we're going to focus in on teams, and specifically virtual and remote. And, one piece that I think is really important to just put on the table, a lot of people don't know this about me, but one of the reasons why I came back to Canada in 2004 was because I had lost vision permanently in one of my eyes the year before. I actually was just getting accepted for a lifetime diplomatic post, and I woke up one morning with an eye infection that literally went out of control. As you can see, I've retained my eye, which is great, but it's sustained permanent injury. And the virtual space has always allowed me now for almost 18 years full time to really navigate the world without even noticing what some would call a disability. I don't term it that way. I just don't see well out of one of my eyes. So with that, today we're going to get into practices, tools, things that you can be doing. I hope that there is something that's a little new for you. So we're going to use the skill of annotation. And we've activated this. If you are not familiar with where annotation is, you will look to the top of your screen where it will say you're viewing Jennifer Britton's screen. Hover over to the right of that, and you'll either see Annotate or View Options. If you see View Options, click on View Options, and then press Annotate. I know it's quite small in Europe. For Europe, I should have brought a bigger map, but I'm also imagining some of you are calling in from different parts of the world. What I'd love for you to do is grab, as some have, grab the arrow, which is the drawing function, or maybe you can use a stamp. Let's see where everyone is calling in from. We've got Lilja over in Iceland. We've got someone in Spain. We've got, it looks like Italy. It looks like a lot of you across the UK, someone from France, or a couple people from France, a couple of you from Spain. I will put myself over here in Canada as well. And it's just a fun way, right? We are geographically enabled people, many of us. It's, and again, I think some of that too can be a bit of a generational issue. My son is 16, and I always find it's so interesting with him as really a digital native, how differently he and I see the world. And I know for me, geographic anchor is such an important piece. So one thing is critical. We want to make sure that we are really helping people feel a sense of connection. My most recent writing, which came out this summer, is called Reconnecting Workspaces, not reconnecting workplaces, but reconnecting workspaces. Because as we can see here across the globe, it looks like we do have some from Africa. Welcome to you. Welcome to India as well, Belgium, and the conversations that we have. And look at that. We have people in Indonesia, Malaysia, fantastic, and Hong Kong, and perhaps even Russia as well. So very much, conversations are global in nature. It looks like we've got South America as well. So really a global event, and helping people recognize, one, that they're not alone, and two, that, we are a bigger part of the whole is, I think, part and critical for post-pandemic thinking. So what's really interesting is, I brought this presentation, I've made very few changes from this time last year. And it's interesting how now, a year later, we really are thinking about what is that next step. Hopefully the turbulence that we have experienced, wave after wave will not continue. But we really want to make sure that we are helping teams come together, because they truly are the engines of business. So another little thing that I want to share with you here on Annotate is just good practice, especially if you are working with a group, working with a team, leading your own webinars. Make sure that you're inviting people to save their screen, right? And that save screen function is just found at the other end of your annotation bar. And that is, of course, to your right-hand side on Annotate. If you don't know where your Zoom recordings are going, this is your test, right? At the end of today's call, you'll actually be able to find where your Zoom recording is. And what you can do is search today's date and probably EMCC, and you will find where your Zoom recordings go. We are able to remember things differently in this visual way versus text versus dialogue. So also be thinking about how you want to set up your calls in terms of that blend of dialogue, etc. For those that are kinesthetic learners, this is a great way to get people active. So I'm going to do a quick thing. I can either clear all drawings, which is like fiddling around in Annotate, or there's a much even faster way, which is stop share. So we're going to come back to the main room. Thumbs up if you're using Annotation already, or you think you might now use Annotate. Okay, so a few of you. Again, for those that love getting a little bit more kinesthetic, which we know we aren't able to do a lot of, it really makes a big difference. So we could use like a welcome map, or here's a second option. We could also bring some icons to the call. So let me just get this set up. So I'm curious, here we are on Friday. What has been some of your focus this week? Have you been involved in video conferencing, maybe some emails, maybe some video chat, etc.? Take a look across the screen, and again, using Annotate so that we can go back into it a little bit more fluidly. Grab your stamp function and let us know 2 things that you've been doing throughout the week. Just interesting, also building our skills and capability. And in something low risk like this, it's a great way to introduce people to annotation. right? There's no risk. It doesn't matter what I stamp or oops, I've made a mistake. As people become more fluid technologically wise, it's much easier. And before you joined us, Nicola and I were talking a little bit about this. But there's still for a lot of professionals some anxiety of like, ooh, this is something new. Will I get it right? And if we were a team, right, it's interesting. I could be asking a question like, what's common across our team today? Obviously, there are certain things that are standing out. A lot of people spending a lot of time here on video chat, video conferencing. And here's the thing, as a team coach, it's not up to me to notice. It's just up to me to ask the question. I would not be filling in the blanks. I would simply be asking the question, team, what do you notice about our map today? Or what do you notice about what's common? And that's where we bring in your voices as team members. So thank you for, again, sort of experimenting, playing, using this with me. It's just yet another way. And a lot of people ask me in my presentations, where do you go to get all of these things? So I want to share a couple of back behind the curtain elements. I love going to Adobe Stock. In fact, I have what is known as a subscription every month. 10 elements is what you get for, it's about 22 US, which is of course 32 Canadian. If we put that into pounds, that's a little bit less. And certainly it is just a great way to build up your stock imagery. I'd like you to actually share in chat, if you wouldn't mind, any other resources you use around images. I've said this a couple of times, but it's key to really be activating people's thinking in different way. Yes, we have dialogue and we're going to be getting into that, but we can also use images to do that. So just look at chat. My hope is that we'll use the chat today as a bit of a back chat. And when I say back chat, it's going to be a way to crowdsource information. So in larger groups and teams and organizations, we do want to harness the back chat of getting those ideas, those great ideas on the table. So Nicola, if you don't mind, because I'm going to actually work to clear the screen, what do we see? Are there some good suggestions or common ground areas that you'd like to share from chat?
We've got a few people, myself included, use pexels.com, but also people's own photos. The emotions thermometer, I haven't heard of that one before, Manon. Miro, Canva, Menti and Unsplash. Jeanette says she loves showing a range of images with coaching clients, ask which one they're drawn to and all that. Suze says about her own objects on screen as well, so bringing images. I guess that's a funny one as well, because the 3D images here, but actually they all could become 2D images, don't they, when we share them? Yes. Surveys at Mentimeter, Pexel, Microsoft Canva, SurveyMonkey, Mural has come up a few times. I haven't come up with that one before. Google Images, DeckHive.
Yep. So a couple of, great image sources. I'll work backwards. DeckHive, actually the excellent card sharing tool, right? It's a platform where you can bring a visual deck and work with it. And that's a fantastic tool. We also heard about Miro and Mural, which now integrate with your Zoom room. And so Miro and Mural, I think, are most commonly known as those apps that give us Post-it notes that we could give to our participants to bring onto the screen. So that's just not a full description of Miro and Mural. They are two separate apps, but it's just another way to bring voices in the room. And when we're working with teams, this is absolutely critical. Again, we're not here just talking about virtual facilitation. We're here to talk about how do we activate team coaching conversations. And a big part of it is helping teams understand who we are in this digital space, what is similar, what is different, and then how do we connect with each other. So with that, I'm going to stop my share because I did clear the annotation. People are still using it, which is great. It's natural. It's part of that experimentation. But now I have sort of rejigged the system so that you would have to open Annotate again in order to stamp on the screen. So with that, we're going to dive in to three main areas in this next hour and a half. We're going to look at some of the challenges that remote teams and I would say hybrid teams are experiencing in the current context of the pandemic. I'll sort of try to think back to what we talked about this time last year, and I'm just interested if anyone on the line today was in that presentation I did last fall. Just let us know and say yes if you were here last year during the EMCC Dialogue series. I also talked last time about tools for supporting remote teams to thrive. So we're going to talk a little bit tool orientation and then also get into some practices, coaching practices. So you've met me a little bit. Again, I have really been sort of a global professional, spending some time working out of the UK. As you heard, I worked for VSO actually for 3 years in the mid 90s, enjoyed my time in London. I was only there for a couple of months at a time, but it was great working and really realized, yes, we are all part of the Commonwealth and really unique, interesting differences. I supported British staff members. I supported also those from Holland and the Netherlands and also Canada, as well as other countries. And, every country is so dramatically different. My experience then took me into working out of Germany. And I spent quite a few years based out of and working out of Germany while I was doing this cross-Atlantic journey. So you can see where I was. I spent 6 years living and working out of a very small country in South America known as Guyana, three quarters of a million people. My husband is from there. When he left the country about 6 months later, I followed. I was at an airport, and a colleague of mine who was working for the UN at the time said, "Why are you here in Barbados? We actually need someone in Barbados. Would you ever consider moving to Barbados?" So I actually was working out of Barbados at doing post-disaster management work, primarily with post-hurricane and post-volcanic activity for about 3 years, covering all of what is known as the Eastern Caribbean, which we've just seen again throughout the pandemic through continued volcanic activity, also facing immense challenges. So this summer, I was privileged to do a TED Talk. And if you haven't seen it, I'd really like to invite you. It's called the Virtual Remote and Hybrid Checklist, to really reflect this passion of mine, which has been about helping teams have their best conversations. And to me, coaching is such an important modality. It is not mentoring, it is not leadership, and it's that conversation with intent. And especially for those of us working with many, it's about sustaining the focus with people. In the remote world this time last year, here were some of the key things that were on the go. It was about helping people focus. It was about looking at what was our location and what was possible from our location, which in those moments was more about a work from home. Think about your context right now. And again, this is still radically different around the world. Here in Toronto, after experiencing one of the world's longest lockdowns last winter, almost 6 months, in terms of everything shutting down except for essential services, we are starting to rebound. But it is going to be a different Toronto post-pandemic. Many people have left the downtown core, right? We're a city of 5 million people, and a lot of businesses have left. They are not going to go back into the big office towers, at least immediately. And many have just said, you know what? We're selling our physical footprint. And so for many, this notion of, are we going to be work from home? Are we going to be hybrid? Are we physically going to go back into work? Really is a lot of the buzz right now. I'd love for you to just share with us in chat again, what are you noticing about context and location? Because we do have different geographic areas here. We have some of you calling in from Asia. We have some of you calling in from Europe, a couple of us in North America, Australasia as well. So really think about what is happening outside your window. Regardless of where we are and where the teams are that we're supporting, it goes back to the basics. And so today we are going to go back to the basics, talking about things like, how do we help teams understand who they are and what their context is? How do we help teams develop a robust culture, whether it is physical, digital, hybrid? And culture is something that is always changing. And it really is rooted deeply in the roles and the goals. Teams, are starting to, and many are mastering how to have a matrix experience where you might be members now not only of one team, but multiple teams. So these were many of the topic areas this time last year. And again, I'm just going in and, notice where people are. We've got Ian McDonald saying in London, UK, more advanced organizations still happy with hybrid working, more traditional thinkers and orgs think about working from home, not working, quite sad. Notice Richard, UK government saying get back to your desks, and thankfully many employers like Deloitte are giving flexibility. We've got Gale in Switzerland. Larger companies seem to be moving to that hybrid model, but smaller organizations are trying to get people back to the office. So a lot of the hybrid, right? And certainly, like, hybrid is not new. I also want to recognize in Kuala Lumpur, PwC is still fully digital. Gudrun in Germany, back to desks mainly. So again, hybrid, physical, virtual, remote, digital, whatever we're going to call it, I think you're going to find that today's presentation has application. We just need to make sure that we are meeting people where they're at, recognizing the additional complexities that happen when we have people, especially in two different formats. So hybrid, I think, is really the most challenging. And having led a lot of hybrid teams, even decades pre-pandemic, it's really about getting clear on what we're going to look at today, which are some of the remote enablers. So what makes for memorability where we are coaching? And again, in coaching, what makes coaching unique, right? We're always coaching for action. We're coaching for awareness. We're helping teams get below what I like to call the waterline of just life and work. We're looking not just at their results, but helping them redesign and reconfigure so that they understand what are their values, what are their belief systems, what are the assumptions they're making, what are the mindsets they're stepping in. These are those elements of awareness, the beliefs, the mindset, the assumptions that really is the heart of coaching. And of course, with teams, we're helping them with that collaborative goal setting. It's been interesting, again, for those organizations that have been all work from home and moving back in, how is goal setting changing? And that might be something, I'll just put that out to this group. How have you been seeing goal setting changing as people return to work in an office space? I'd love to see if you're seeing anything different around goal setting, goal attainment, as people are navigating from a fully work from home to the office and or the hybrid. If you have any comments about that, just pop those in chat for us right now. In my work, again, as you've heard, I've had this passion for remote work for many decades. Pre-pandemic, the summer of 2019, I collaborated. I sort of turned to a colleague of mine who I've worked with for many years, and I said, hey, would you be interested in starting a podcast? Her name is Michelle Mullins, and we launched more than 2 years ago the Remote Pathways podcast, which actually follow some of the characters in my writing. As an author, every summer, I spend 72 hours, a 3-day weekend, joining other authors. Used to be physical, now it's digital, but we write for adult literacy. So it's a fundraiser. And 3 summers ago, a year before the pandemic, I birthed this team, or actually this group of people known as the Digital Dozen, from project managers to virtual team leaders, from those working from home to, we have Jane, our virtual facilitator, who's there on the end. The Digital Dozen represent 12 different pathways to remote work. Pre-pandemic, a lot of people were like, I just don't get this. But now people are recognizing, the remote space is not just unidimensional. There's a lot of common ground, but it can also be different. And so with this passion of mine for 3 decades, leading teams, right, the teams that I led in South America could take 5 days travel to reach, right? So as a leader, as a program director, my role was really about activating those micro teams. It was about helping them do their best work. And a part of that was about enabling. And so as part of my work, writing, research, and you'll read this if you pick up copies of Reconnecting Workspaces or the latest 90-day guide for success. A lot of my work in recent years has been working alongside organizations, helping them at a macro level or at a team level understand what can remote work really look like. And as we get into it, there are at least 7 main areas, which I call the 7 Cs, the 7 remote enablers. These are ones that we're going to spend some time talking about this morning because each one of them is a different lever that you can be using and exploring together. As we kick off team coaching, one of the most important things is asking the team, what is it that you want to be looking at? And oftentimes, teams don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of money to do work around, key assessments, perhaps. So, this was my way a few years ago to start helping a team understand which of these elements that we know makes for successful remote work will help you move the needle forward. So, we're going to go through this right now. And I'd like you, people are already grabbing the annotation, which is fantastic. I'd like you to think about a team or an organization that you're working with right now. As you think about that, think about which of these levers could be more activated or focused on. So I'm going to start at the 12 o'clock position with communication. And as we know, in the virtual, remote, and especially the hybrid space, communication is key. We're communicating across channels. We've had that conflict often emerge in the last 18 months because of the misuse or overuse of different communication channels. Messages don't get through. And certainly in times of change, in times of crisis, in any team, we need regular ongoing communication. So if you see your body of work really diving more right now into communication, give us that stamp. And hand in hand with communication, of course, is clarity. Teams thrive when they have clarity of purpose, clarity of rules, clarity of goals, and also when there's clarity around things like process and languaging. So it's encouraging to see that for some of you, your focus right now with teams really is clarity. I find that the clarity piece beyond communication and collaboration really is a big one. I'm also encouraged to see that the next one, connection, is key. Right? If you think about the people that you're working with, if they are not yet back in the office, reconnecting is truly, one of the big areas. And this was the push for me to get Reconnecting Workspaces out. In fact, it was a manuscript I had started back in 2017 and obviously went through many iterations. At one point, it was simply called virtual VRTWL, virtual remote teams, work, and leadership. And then eventually it came out as Reconnecting Workspaces. As I'll be sharing today, there really are multiple layers that we can be connecting on. We could be connecting with each other. We could be connecting with the technology. We could be connecting with the messaging and our vision. So notice where people are with connection. A big one that I've been hearing, and I'm sure you have too, I do a lot of work with HR professionals, is culture. And building and rebuilding a robust hybrid, remote, or back in person culture is key. Think about how you're helping teams have conversations around how we do things here, what's important, what are the mantras, what are the mottos that we subscribe to. Some other remote enablers, and these were actually a little bit more important. Well, certainly consistency was more important, I think, early days in the pandemic as organizations and teams started figuring out how do we do things here. But consistency is key. Consistency of meetings. You're probably still getting a lot of pushback as a team coach from teams saying, oh, we just don't have time. But those consistent conversations with us and with themselves are so critical. And this is a really key piece around team coaching, right? We are not there to create a dependency. We're there actually to activate their independence. And so as a team coach, we're coming in and out of their system all the time. Part of what we want to be doing is helping them think through what are the ways they're communicating? What are the practices they're doing? Are they doing huddles every day? Or are they at least doing a weekly meeting to get the dialogue going? We need to have that sense of consistency. And while many organizations are back on stream with that, about a year ago at this time, this was still a major issue. Finally, we have community and collaboration. And again, many of you might be wondering, well, how is community different than connection, right? And community, of course, is that, that bringing together of people to around a common issue and a common interest. We, of course, need those collaborative skills. And as I'll share a little bit later in this presentation, the area of remote collaboration is continuing to be highlighted as an area of extreme need. So here's what we're going to do. I've been talking way long enough. I've had your voices on the screen, but you have not had a chance to speak yet. So this is what we're going to do in just a minute. Nicola is going to set you up in breakout. I'm going to invite you to head over to breakout. Again, if you don't want to be in a breakout, please change your name right now to NBR, no breakout room. Okay, so if you don't want to go to breakout, just put on NBR and then your name. Otherwise, Nicola will, I think, automatically shift you to a breakout room. She's nodding yes. We're going to go to breakout for about 8 minutes. And I'd like you to, of course, introduce yourself in the room. We're going to make this 10 minutes, actually, Nicola. We'll make it 10 because 8 minutes the other day was not enough for a group that I worked with. So introduce yourself and talk a little bit about these 7 remote enablers. With the one that you've selected, what is the resourcing that you need or you're looking for to help you coach more effectively? And maybe it's simply as, I'd love some questions around how could I get teams thinking about collaboration? Or I really would love a resource around culture. So my invite is, as you get to your room, introduce yourself to each other and share which one of these 7 remote enablers you are spotlighting and you're looking at in your work right now. And then if you have an ask, if you have a request, please ask your group. This is an opportunity for you to do some peer-to-peer sharing. Just going to do a check-in here with Nicola. Do we need another minute or so, Nicola?
No, that's fine. I've just been moving all the NBR people into the NBRs, and everybody else should be in groups of about, oh, hang on a second, 2 more people have just NBR'd. Just give me... You're all moving around. Is everybody...
It's Friday. It's a Friday.
They're allowed on a Friday. So just bear with me. I'm just making sure that you've got somebody to talk to. Hang on a second.
Excellent. And we're going to make this for about 10 minutes. For those that are NBRing, I will be here if people want to ask questions. I'll certainly take any questions as well. We are recording. We've got 65 of you. So if you are here either in North America, good morning to you as you're coming online. If you are in Asia, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us on a Friday evening. I know many of you are here at lunchtime. Okay, so we're going to head out for 10 minutes. And again, I hope that you'll enjoy your conversation. Here's my request when we come back into the room. If each group could share one resource, right? Share at least one resource that you would find useful supporting any of these. You can also identify what that resource is. But one thing that I hope that you will take from today's presentation is a very robust chat list of resources to support you in your work. All right, Nicola, open the rooms and enjoy your conversations.
I'll see you back in 10 minutes. I'll give you a 2-minute countdown as well. We're 8 minutes in.
All right. Thank you, Nicola. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your convo. Welcome back to everyone. So we'd love to hear from you. What were your ideas? Now, we had quite a few people who did an NBR, but listen in, we are back. And Nicola's going to start off. So first, let's get a representative from every room just to pop into chat. As I said, one resource or a tool, something that you'd like to share with the bigger group. We had some really good comments coming in at the first part of this presentation. So we're about midstream now. And Nicola, do you want to share some of those things that we were zooming into and hearing in part 1 of this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking just while the breakout rooms were happening about some of the comments that had been left just before we went to breakout. And something which Richard Tarrant said really resonates with me as well. He says, I found people are feeling that they've got to solve challenges by themselves more. And I found this as well. It's always just another barrier, isn't it, to pick up the phone or go onto a Zoom rather than just yell across to somebody across the other side of the office to say, hey, do you know this? And Ksenia was saying that Croatia has returned mostly to offices, especially young people prefer being in the office. I found this in, some people do, some people don't. So I was interested in maybe how different countries and different cultures found going back to the office. Sharif was talking about senior leaders engaging in more authentic ways. Sorry, Jennifer, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, let's finish up that last one. So, who was the last person that said leaders engaging in more authentic ways?
That was Sharifa.
Sharifa, yeah. So from leadership engagement to what is often being termed now the third office, right? So the third office is really a co-working experience. And one of the experiments I started in my own business earlier this year, because I was really sensing that there was a yearning and a need for connection. And again, my primary focus, of course, is always group coaching. So I really felt that it was important to bring people together in a virtual space. And we did 5 months of an experiment, and it was called the 21 for 21, 21 minutes of virtual co-working a day. It was amazing to see what people were actually taking forward with their work, from redesigning websites to doing client outreach, writing articles. I think it really was the piece that helped me bring Reconnecting Workspaces over the finish line, because you might think that 21 minutes is only a quick burst of time. But if you do that consecutively for 21 days or even 10 days, you really start seeing time, right? 21 days at 21 minutes a day is 7 hours, 7.5 hours. Where else can you find margin like that, right? And that's a big part of this remote work productivity space, is how do we find the boundaries, but also how do we find those levers? And so I'm following a lot of the research right now, and again, and obviously as a writer, but this whole notion of the third office with co-working, right? And a lot of people across all ages are looking to our local co-working communities this summer. So I usually work remote, as I like to call it, for the months of July and August. I work out of a small 100-year-old cottage that my great grandmother built 100 years ago now, and it has very basic, it has electricity and Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi is really, really slow. And so for 18 summers up to this year, I've been doing calls out of the cottage. But this was the first year that I turned to our local co-working space. And it was so inspiring to actually be able to go in, of course, with a lot of distancing and a lot of restrictions, but it really has been a great place. And it's made me realize that when I make my next move from here, which is very close to Toronto, I'm an hour north of Toronto right now, I'll be moving in about a year and a half to that location, 3 hours north of Toronto. Because with technology today, we can do so much more, and it's completely acceptable for a lot of organizations to do that with. So let's see, that was sort of my song and dance to just give you a moment or two to see what were some of the comments coming in from our rooms. And I'll work backwards up the screen. So, things like connections, adding video calls to help put a face on the interaction, and spending time to know the other person, what is happening in his or her world, helped make better connections and eventually increase teams' communication, especially listening. And I love that, right? It is the connection, it's understanding context, and there still may be a lot of need around the context piece. I like to say what's beyond the screen, because we don't often ask what is beyond our little 3x4 windows. And that is often in a remote space, hybrid team, where that conflict, where some of those challenges emerge. And so Susie's asking, Jennifer, are these co-working spaces face-to-face or remote and hybrid? So you can do all of those now, right? I belong to one called the Muskoka Collective. It's actually a face-to-face environment. I am still hosting remote sprints, the 21 for 21. In fact, in Q4, it's emerged and grown into a 30-minute call that I'm hosting weekdays at 7:30. So I'll be dropping off actually when I finish in 40 minutes here to go to my room, and I'm hosting a 30-minute call until the end of the year as I bring forward this latest 90-day guide. So the 90-day guide for success is really a 90-day sprint for people in a remote hybrid space to have focus, because what people have lost is really this ability to get some traction. So you can make a lot of different things happen. Notice our different comments here. Several groups discuss culture on a political, social level. We have another comment, sharing personal moments of joy on a weekly basis, culture, connections, doing a virtual Friday lunch. That's good. Let's see what else we have here. Veronica's saying it's about making the unconscious conscious. Absolutely. That's really the heart of coaching. We also have a comment that in France, there's a bit of an assumption that everything should happen in Paris. So people who are usually okay for going back to the office are the ones who live nearby, and the ones who aren't tend to be the ones living or leaving in other parts of the country and who prefer a different return on investment over time. Another piece I've been really researching and following quite closely is what's happening here in our city of Toronto, right? 5 million people, and a lot of businesses have opted to go hybrid and or still continue with remote work. 70%, actually 80% of Canadians polled in August said that they did not want to return to the office full time. And it's interesting. We have a very high vaccination rate. So people are actually becoming a bit more comfortable in going back to the office, but they don't want to be tied to the office. And what's happened in our big cities is with the pandemic, a lot of people opted to cash out, sell out, and move hours away, right? Toronto has always been a commuting city. For where I am, an hour away from the city, that's absolutely normal to commute every day on a train or in your car still. And but what has happened has been this real hollowing out. And so people have moved 3, 4 hours away and are not going to return back 5 days a week. So, jury is still out. And I think every country is going to be a little different going forward as we really see this. Kelly's mentioned seeking accessibility support such as live transcription and working with participants on mobile. Yes, these are key issues. How are we inviting people and creating inclusive environments for conversation and dialogue, right? This is the dialogue series. So really thinking about some of those areas, the transcription, people who are mobile. Mobility is going to come back on the table, right? A year ago at this month, I had some hot debated issues with a fellow colleague in our industry who was saying to me, Jennifer, mobility is dead. No one's going to go back to mobility. I said, just wait, right? Like, just give it time. Mobility is going to come back on the table and be such a key issue. Again, thinking through all of these, and interesting. Yes, so very good. Let us head back to this presentation because I want to segue us into one of the topics that we heard from you. So, ultimately, team coaching is still team coaching, right? We need the engagement and onboarding of team leaders. Of course, we need to make sure that teams are connecting this into their everyday practices and that they are owning this process. So think about how team coaching can be looking different. Hybrid team versus in-person team. A couple weeks ago, it's increasingly common to have these hybrid engagements, right? So, again, I was very conscious of the team that I was working with. They were relatively new. They wanted to ensure that, everyone was on board. And I had a situation where there were 14 of them in a room and one who was not in a room. They also wanted to become a little bit better on, their communication practices. So I said to them, would it be useful if we all show up on Zoom, even those of you that are in your main boardroom? Let's see what happens if you all show up on Zoom. And we had a half-day working session. What was really fascinating by the end of that half-day working session is even though people were beside each other, everyone was doing the dialogue on the screen. And I mean, verbal dialogue, as well as, a lot of annotation, etc. And for the one person who was not able to join their team and was feeling very isolated, real major breakthrough for them. It was also a major breakthrough for the team members in that boardroom to be thinking about how were they being inclusive and not inclusive with their conversations. So really be thinking about how can you be a little bit more experimental, doing things a little different, quote unquote, than you might automatically assume, because we really want to make sure we're in an equal environment. And the challenge for hybrid really over decades has always been the us them that gets created. So what are we doing to put all people on one platform as much as possible? A couple of other things that have popped up and being important is, of course, engagement, connection, process, right? We really need to be a lot stronger with process because we do know it's harder to wing it. And there is immense value in the pre-work. Also be thinking about the overall arc of the learning process, right? Coaching is one of many modalities in learning. And the activation that happens in a coaching conversation also needs to be anchored. It is experienced differently if we're in the room versus on the screen. So be thinking about what's going to support your team members in anchoring that. When I say anchoring that, what I often think of as a coach is things like structures. What are the structures we're inviting people to consider? And we don't have to assert what those structures are, but it's just making sure that we're inviting people to think about the structures that are going to keep the conversation alive, whether they are in the office, whether they are at their home, whether they're out in the field. What is going to be the structure that can be mobile as well and move with them through these different workspaces, especially if it is a more fluid workspace. Now, one of the themes I want to dive into for a few minutes before we go back to another breakout is, of course, remote collaboration, right? So earlier I shared this PwC survey that was done several months ago. They went out and surveyed 669 CEOs, which really, the question was, is remote collaboration here to stay? 78% of them said, yes, it is. And so starting with my first book, Effective Group Coaching, a decade ago, I've always been fascinated looking at collaboration as it relates to coaching, whether it's two co-coaches working together, whether it's us partnering, of course, with our clients, but remote collaboration also is key. So I want to invite you from From One to Many book, which was published back in 2013. There were several digital chapters that I wrote, which were never published physically, but have always been available digitally. And I just want to make that available to you if you're interested. You can go to FromOneToMany.com, looks like from12many.com/downloads.html. And you're going to be asked for a code. That code is 4411. But when you get there, you'll see a new web page open up. You'll see a chapter on case studies for group coaching, case studies for team coaching. There's one on marketing group and team coaching for those who are interested. And there's also one on collaboration. And I think collaboration really is a significant issue, especially in a remote space, when we as team coaches are coming together and working together to partner with our team clients. You may find some tips in that chapter on collaboration, some questions really to help you design your partnership, because teams really need us. They need us in multiple voices. When I show up with a team coaching partner, we bring two sets of eyes, two sets of voices, two sets of ears. And it's always been challenging to really have that great dance together in the room. When we're virtual or even hybrid, because sometimes now one person is in the room, one person is virtual. That's often common of how we're working in with my team partners, team coaching partners who are coaches. We really have to be lockstep together. So take some time to design those relationships. In fact, the collaboration chapter that you will find in From One to Many, and then there's an older one from Effective Group Coaching, is really about design and getting feedback on an ongoing basis. So collaboration is key. What's at stake? Questioning, communication, listening, and finding common ground. What would you say is at the heart of collaboration? And we'll go to chat on this. Just think about the collaboration you're engaging with, particularly if you're doing co-coaching. I'm really interested in this one right now of co-coaching, because it is, I think, such a sticking point for us as coaches, whether we are face-to-face, hybrid, or all remote. What would you say is the magic ingredient of great co-coaching? What is the thing you need to really be masterful as showing up as that unit of support for a team? And here's where I'm going to get Nicola to be my eyes. Nicola, do you mind reading out a couple of them as they're coming in?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Let me just find my chat box.
What are the skills needed to really be a masterful co-coach? So I think we've got one, round table mindset. What else?
Sue was talking about a deep connection and psychological safety as well. People have been finishing their typing now, so Jeanette's coming in quickly with a great dynamic between the two coaches is a great start. And Gail's talking about trust in the other. Steve brings in building connection and rapport. And Jeff talks about facilitation skills. Barbara talked about contracting and also recontracting. Trust and clarity, says David. Inclusiveness, says Richard. Trust again with Sharifa. Mariette says having each other's back and knowing each other and sharing. Richard likes this. I love this. The great dance partnership. I love that. Jeanette, collaboration in the preparation. Sharifa again, openness in the emergence process. Navneet also listening and trust. Yeah. Bit of a theme of trust here and just connectivity, isn't there? Complementary skills and approach, says Barbara. Trust and empathy, says Denise. And presence and trust, says Ksenia. Ksenia says adds presence.
And Susie had also put in trust, empathy, smile, powerful questions. So yeah, energy. Excellent. Notice that Kate's got the What's Up thread with her co-coach for connection around the work. Richard, naming your own feelings and needs.
Rapport as well, psychological safety, building rapport, says Agnesia. Susie, just a typo. Barbara, drop any ego.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So whether you're already co-coaching or thinking about it, like really save this chat log and together ask yourselves, are we doing this? This is the difference between good team coaching and masterful team coaching, because the team will also be looking to you to see how do you navigate your differences? How do you navigate your distinctions? How do you navigate your conflict? So it can be a whole lab in and of itself. And what I find interesting is about a decade and a half ago, Resmus did some study around how to make collaboration work. They really said, certain things are needed in those collaborative environments, many of which you've just identified. So skills in facilitation, right? I think masterful team coaches have upped their ante in facilitation. Facilitation, of course, meaning to make things easy. And as coaches, we're employing facilitation approaches, but we are not just facilitating, right? We're activating, the team and really allowing the team to own the process. As a facilitator, I'm still owning the process. Resmus's work in sort of looking at collaboration also said we really need to be activating brainstorming and technology and thinking about ethics, as well as building skills in team building and conflict resolution and negotiation. And I think all of these elements are still very relevant and key as we shift from the blah, 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 multitasking mindset, what I call the death by conference call in my 2017 book. This actually came from a 2017 cartoon and Effective Virtual Conversations. And we actually want to show up more like Joe. Joe is a new team leader who is really, in that space of involvement, in that space of engagement, in that space of gratitude to bring people together. So there's lots of things we can be doing with teams, many, many different team coaching models. Certainly when I start working with a team, we often go to vision or revisit the vision. A lot of that is because my own bias as a coach and as a professional really is a belief that vision helps to anchor things, especially in times of turbulence. So vision usually stays a little bit more stable. It may be revisited along the way. Recently, I wrote an article for Choice Magazine, and their latest edition is known as Disruption. And there's some great articles in that. Maybe in our next breakout, I'll just go grab it so you can see the cover. But in it, I talk about the importance of vision, experimentation, as well as curiosity. And so with teams, we want to help them also build those skills, but there's some very practical things we need to make sure people are leaning into. So how are they coming together and revisiting their goals and their performance measures? Are they reenacting their team practices and roles and having that shared commitment? So for you, which of these 6 areas is most important to explore with the teams you coach? I'll go back to this because it's a bigger sort of landscape. Which of these elements is important to revisit with the teams that you're in dialogue with right now? Each one of them can lay the seeds for conflict. Each one of them can also be that important lever to move people forward. So take a moment, just grab your annotation again and let us know which of these 6 factors are important for you in your work as a team coach. And if you're not team coaching yet, which one intrigues you? We'll see what everyone's thinking today. We've got lots of different markers across the map. Vision is coming up pretty big. Roles as well. I know in the teams that I work with, roles is probably the often not seen as an initial area of focus needed, but it very quickly rises to the surface. Who's doing what? Who's best placed to do what? Who's sick and tired of doing things? So no right answer here, but notice commitment as well. Yeah, how are we committed? What are we committed to, no matter what? And a lot around goals, also shared practices. It's interesting. I often, again, with coaches, but also HR professionals, I do a lot of work with HR professionals. I'm often asking this question, and it's been circling throughout the pandemic, right? Early on in the pandemic, a lot of people were key on shared vision, not thinking as much about commitment and rules, but those have really risen to the surface. So notice some other words there. Yeah, shared vision, the why, and purpose. Yes. And purpose being different from vision. Absolutely. So vision, mission, mandate, right? Our purpose. Why do we exist? What are we, and some of that goes into commitment as well. So like many things in the remote and hybrid world, it is not a silo in and of itself. I think that's one of the things that's been great, seeing that, in order to thrive in this space, we actually need to connect across all the silos that exist. We need to become more multidisciplinary. We need to really be looking at those elements. So thanks for sharing those. I'm going to stop my share. And I think here's what we're going to do. We're going to go do one more. Would you like to do one more breakout? Quick show of hands. Who wants to do another breakout? Yep. Okay, we're going to go do one more breakout. And in this one, I just want to share one more slide before I pull you out there, because I think, we do want to get into some practices. One of the key things that has been a continued sticking point throughout the pandemic is lack of attention, but also lack of memorability. And when I say attention, right, I mean, like, where am I putting my focus? What am I looking at? What am I paying attention to? And so Suzuki wrote, a lot on looking at virtual attention. She wrote, we make things memorable when things are novel, surprising, emotional, and attention grabbing. And we really want to make sure that we're bringing everyone into the room, particularly in team coaching. And in a digital space, we've had to really look at how do we activate these different levers? How are we using chat? And I hope even out of today's presentation, you're thinking about how you might activate the back chat more often. Wow is the ways of working. Are we capturing our ways of working, our team agreements, our group agreements in chat so they're visible to everyone? Are we co-designing those as we step into calls? We haven't used polls today, but we have heard several of you mentioning things like Mentimeter, great polling function. You might also use Poll Everywhere, or of course we can build polls into Zoom. Today we've been using Annotation as another one of the engagement levers. Think about how that's a different way for people to, find common ground as we've been doing it. Or you might use Annotation to co-design and co-create on the screen. That's also where we have whiteboards, which we won't touch on much today, but that's a very underutilized area. And of course, our breakouts. So making sure that they are long enough, making sure that our group size is good. And Nicola's done a great job in keeping the room size 5 or less, right? Because groups splinter when they become more than 5 people. And making sure that we are also giving clear instruction and broadcasting. So we can be doing a lot of different things in our rooms. I'm going to just move ahead. For me, team coaching, and this is how I defined it back in 2013, team coaching to me has always been the sustained process of not only dialogue, but opportunity for teams to reflect so that they can learn and then put things into action. I think today in 2021, most people in the coaching industry recognize that team coaching is not a one-off, right? It's a sustained series of conversations occurring over time. Our team coaching clients often don't understand that. So, lots of definitions from David and Peter's work, Clutterbuck, and of course Hawkins. My work, certainly all of the new books that are coming out in this area. We really want to make sure that we are looking at who are we strengthening? Team as a system, and in the remote space, how are we also strengthening individuals in the system? Right? Part of the remote experience has been we've needed to activate the individual, and when we work with a remote team, we need to be looking with the team at what is that balance of individual strength and collective experience. This is a bit of a difference, right? In team coaching and remote hybrid, because everyone is a key player in the system, we also need to be very clear on what do people need in order to thrive in the different contexts they are located in, which may be very distributed. We also want to think back to how is this helping us move the needle on results and relationships? And when I say we, I mean we as the team. What's going to help the team move the needle on results and relationships? So we can be getting engaged in a lot of different areas. As we go to this next breakout, I want you to be thinking about what's important for your teams right now. Is it helping them with strategy? Is it helping them get clear on goals and objectives? Is it helping them with collaboration or action, planning, scheduling, checking in and checking things off, getting better, or implementation? We're going to have time to do one more breakout, and this will be your opportunity to talk about what's important for the teams that you work with right now. We are going to make this shorter so that you can come back here and have about 5 minutes for a wrap up. And for those that want to stay on until the top of the hour, at the 1/2 mark, you will be able to move into some networking. So Nicola, 5 minutes, will that be enough, do you reckon?
Yep, 5 minutes will be good. People can take a screenshot as well of this slide if they wanted to.
Yes, if you'd like to take a screenshot, again, you can just talk more generically. What's important for your teams right now? What are they looking for? What are they wanting and needing? We want to get a little bit more granular in terms of where might the request for team coaching come? What might the conversations take you into? That's okay, wonderful. So enjoy that 5-minute conversation.
Brilliant. See you back in 5 minutes.
Take care. So welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed whatever your breakout was like, or as we were hearing, some of us are juggling multiple hats as my household is actually getting awake for the day as well. I was off to my 85 and 86-year-old parents before this presentation to get them set up. So Nicola is what we'd love to do. We're going to go to sort of like a formal close off in about 10 minutes. We would love to hear from you. What were some of those ideas that came up? Any themes, any trends? Certainly, remote teams right now, hybrid teams need everything. And we had some really good comments. We looked at the comment log. Someone was asking, with group coaching, this is great, but what about larger teams? And so what can this work look like? And, coaching is coaching is coaching. I think that's always important. We don't need a lot of fancy dancy things. We really just need space for conversation and dialogue. There are, of course, facilitated processes we can use to springboard, and I say springboard into the dialogue. So whether we're working with a new team that is looking at setting their vision, identifying their values, thinking about how they might operate, I want to share with you one very practical tool here. This is something that I published a few years ago. It's in my Plan Do Track Coaching Business Builder books. Because certainly when I come together with teams, what you can see here on the wall is, a team's values. They had values like respect, values like good communication, values like helping, values like positivity. And when we started our team coaching engagement, they were like adamant, like we've done our values. My question's like, great, that's wonderful. And earlier I said that's below the waterline. As a team coach, I'm always curious about how are your values translating into action? What are your values doing in terms of shaping those behaviors that are going to help you get the results? And in a team environment, particularly in a hybrid and remote team environment, we may not be seeing the behaviors that are leading to results. So if you can imagine this iceberg, which has always been complex in person, when we're now all digital and we can't see each other's behaviors Or if we're hybrid and we still can't see each other's behaviors, it makes it even more important now to have discussion around those below the waterline topics: mindsets, habits, perspectives, assumptions, beliefs, and values. And that's the heart of coaching, right? We're still coaching and leading from those main places. So for people who are interested in more than like the 2 minutes I've spent on this, this is a big part of my latest writing, right? With Reconnecting Workspaces, you'll see see chapters on the trust, safety, and connection. You'll see more information around the iceberg, etc. But we want to remember that team coaching is still coaching. So everything you already have in your toolbox is going to help stimulate those conversations for these larger groups of teams. And I keep saying groups, but I'm really thinking in the team context. What is, of course, been unique with hybrid remote is that many groupings feel less like a team and have felt more like a group. They've lost the interdependence. I think the challenge now at this point of the pandemic and hopefully the opening up in this next phase is rebuilding that social fabric, rebuilding those connections that have dissipated quite a bit in the last couple of months. So let's go to chat and see if there's some ideas. Nicholas says, I want to read all of Jennifer's books. So just know that, you can absolutely be selective. I think for people who are interested in team coaching, start with From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. I think it's a really great complement with, like, not to toot my own horn, but Reconnecting Workspaces is really needed now. It is the piece that people need right now. And then for people who are coaching, individual contributors, groups, or teams, the 90-day guide is really it's the coaching guide that accompanies Reconnecting Workspaces. In fact, Reconnecting Workspaces is going to be a series of 12 books eventually. So I hope that when I come back, not in a couple of months, but maybe in a few years, you say, you know what, I really enjoyed this book on project management in the remote space, or I really enjoyed this book on virtual facilitation. So to wrap today's session up on team coaching, I just want to give some sort of focus to what we see in chat. And Richard has said it so eloquently. I believe it's important to allow introverted reflection time. So frequent solo breaks are important too. Absolutely. And as I want to build on to what Richard said, we don't need huge amounts of time, right? Many times, even setting a timer for 3 minutes to do some reflective work in a team before they comment, or do 3 minutes to draw something out individually, which they can share with each other. These are ways that we activate people in the wide diversity that we know will be showing up in our rooms. So coaching primarily and historically has always been verbal. It will always be verbal. But what I hope that you are taking out of some of today's presentation is we need to make it more visual. We need to make it more kinesthetic. We need to make it a little bit different than just the conversation, because we don't all see the world in that way. And especially when we're working globally, across cultures, across languages, we may need to look at, how do we use visuals and icons to really connect us in a much more basic way. And I don't mean basic in terms of simple way, but in a much quicker way where we can get to the core of the conversation. So I hope that you've enjoyed our dialogue this morning as much as I have. I want to thank Nicola. I've got to drop off for my 7:30 call, but I will be back. Nicola and I have just booked, I think it's what date? November 16th. I'll be back for a session for the annual series, and I hope that some of you will join me. It'll be an evening presentation. We'd love to just see from all of you in the room. We've still got 42 of you here, which is amazing after 90 minutes. Share with us in chat, if you don't mind, one of your takeaways that you're going to put into practice, right? We're all coaches here. So what's the one thing you're going to put into practice as a result of your listening and engagement? More importantly, your engagement today. We'd love to just see what some of the takeaways are. And, again, there's always learning in this space as coaches. It doesn't matter whether we've been coaching for a year or several decades. Hopefully, like myself, you are continuing to learn and grow each and every day. And I love seeing, everything from the 7 C's to, again, a collaboration piece. Great things. Nicola, I hope that you will save the chat. I'm going to save the chat before I fade out here.
Does everybody know how to save the chat as well? If you look down the bottom right hand corner, you see those 3 dots, and you can click Save Chat as well. Yes. You'll get all this rich dialogue that we've been having, all this first-hand collaboration and information from people as well, especially those tips that we had at the beginning about different picture platforms to use, and as conversations are developing as well. So do go and share that as well. There was a lovely comment here from Richard, which I thought, oh, let me find it. Oh my goodness, there's so many different coming in. Oh, actually, things that you're going to take away as well. Mary was saying, give 3 minutes time for reflection when considering a question. Do you know, everything's like 100 miles an hour really at the moment, isn't it? That reflection time, I think it's so important. Oh, thanks, Sharifa. Recording, yes, recording, shared, absolutely. Mary, the importance of reflection rather than doing, absolutely. Kinesthetic, says Matthew. Think of novel and memorable ways to build and maintain connection. More kinesthetic. Oh, I can't spell kinesthetic. I said it right from Ruth. More kinesthetic experience from Ruth. 21 minutes, 21 days. Oh, that was brilliant. I love that. 21 minutes, 21 days. 21 and 21, the 7 C's again, says Helen as well. How to use annotation, says Susie. Select a tool to help me share visual cards on Zoom, says Irene. Oh, Barbara's off to get the downloads. If you save the chat, I typed the URL of the web address in there as well, along with the code. It's the second code I put in because I put too many ones on the first one. But if you share the chat, you'll find that in there as well.
So if anyone's interested in learning more, definitely look me up. You'll find me all over different social feeds, etc. I think often where I do love to connect is obviously on LinkedIn. You know, certainly check out reconnectingworkspaces.com and groupcoachingessentials.ca. And with that, I'm going to have to fade out here. But thank you, everyone, whatever time of day it was. Have a great end of your week. I'll look forward to connecting with you, Nicola, to get any feedback people would like to share. And thank you for spending time with us today. Have a good one.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Nicola.
Have a great day, everyone.